I've asked them to bring the house lights up just so I can see you, have some sense that you're there. I'm a teacher, and teaching is a relationship. It's not just me speaking into a void. It's all of us together really seeing what God has for us. But I wanted to talk this morning a bit more about vocation, how we can discern God's call in our life. And I want to start with a personal story. In my very first job out of the university, I had a terrible, awful, public, humiliating failure, okay? One of those really awful job experiences. And the terrible thing for me was that it was in a Christian setting. It was a Christian organization. And I not only felt a failure at work, but I felt a failure in my attempt to serve God. It was almost a sense that God said, well, you can't do anything, And so I was cast out. There was this terrible sense of failure and abandonment on my part. And in fact, and then that, of course, was complicated by unemployment and poverty and all the things that go with that. And so it was a very difficult time. And it was during this time that I first began to pray in Catholic churches. Now, I was not Catholic, and I did not become Catholic for a number of years later. But I started to pray in the church that is now my parish home. And it was wonderful. One day, I found there, someone had left what I'm about to read to you. Now, again, it's by John Henry Newman. I had no idea who Newman was. I had never heard of him. And I only saw this once, and when I came back to the church, it was gone. But it was the great light in my darkness. And it took me another 8 years to find this passage again and to find out who John Henry Newman was. But I want to read it to you as a beginning place to think about how does God lead us to our call in life. God has created me to do him some definite work. He has committed some work to me which he has not committed to another. I have my mission. I may not know it in this life, but I shall be told it in the next. Somehow I am necessary for his purposes, as necessary in my place as an archangel in his. If indeed I fail, he can raise another, as he can make the stones children of Abraham. Yet I have a part in this great work. I am a link in a chain, a bond of connection between persons. I shall do his work. I shall be an angel of peace, a preacher of truth in my own place, while not intending it, if I do but keep his commandments and serve him in my calling. Therefore, I will trust him. Whatever, wherever I am, I can never be thrown away. If I am in sickness, my sickness may serve him. In perplexity, my perplexity may serve him. If I am in sorrow, my sorrow may serve him. My sickness or perplexity or sorrow may be necessary causes of some great end, which is quite beyond us. He does nothing in vain. He knows what he is about. The most important point of discernment for us as lay people, as lay Catholics. Remember we talked yesterday? I'm going to ask the question again. How many people here are apostles? Please raise your hand. Oh, an improvement, definite. Now, more, come on. I want to see some more. Will the apostles in the room please raise their hand? Okay, good. We have, every one of us, been consecrated by Jesus Christ himself in baptism, in confirmation, to be apostles in this world. And there is no such thing as apostolic unemployment. Okay? We're all apostles here. What is the most important point of discernment for us? It's very interesting. Do you realize that when religious and priests have discerned their vocation, Their discernment in some sense may be said to sort of, they finished it. Ours has just begun. When we realize that we are not called to religious life, and maybe we are not called to priesthood, our discernment has just begun. Because then the question is, what is the personal work of love to which I am called? Because the lay office is as vast as the world. All we have to do is evangelize the world. Not a problem, right? Sure. That's all we have to do. How on earth can I narrow that down? How can I find my place in this enormous work of God? That's why our discernment, actually it's interesting, almost all the discernment programs that you hear of vocational discernment, it's all focused on helping you decide whether you're called to religious life, whether you're called to the priesthood. But what about the rest of us? We are apostles too. What about our discernment? Okay? It's very important. Our discernment begins where many others have ended. Now, we said yesterday, what's a vocation? A vocation is the personal work of love to which God has called us individually. It's our little piece of participation in the much, much larger work of redeeming the whole world, that Christ is at work in the world doing that, and he allows us the dignity of collaborating with him in one very specific small arena. That is our vocation. And as we said, for lay people, what was characteristic of us? What is the word? Secular. Secular. What does secular mean? What does it mean? Does it mean hates God? No. It means all the world. It means pertaining, focused around God's purposes and God's redemption of this life and this world. Okay, that's what's unique about our call. We are the people in the church who have responsibilities, particular responsibility for the secular mission of the church. So, now as we said, does everybody have a vocation? Yes? Good, okay. There's no such thing as vocational unemployment. All right, so that's important. But now the question always comes up, well, what's the difference between my vocation and how I make a living? My career, my job. That's a very important question. Our vocation is not the same necessarily as how we make our living. Is that making sense? For some people, now ideally we would like to bring them as close together as we possibly could. But sometimes our vocation absolutely requires that it be kept separate. I have a close friend, a woman who is doing some of the most remarkable work, very quietly, in a part of the world that is absolutely closed to mission work. She is in one of the most repressive countries on the face of the planet. She is there in her private capacity. Her passport does not say missionary because it couldn't. No one could get in. The Pope couldn't get in. Mother Teresa's sisters couldn't get in. Her passport says homemaker. And yet she is out there on the frontiers sharing the faith with men and women who otherwise would have no living contact with the church. She does this, and she can do this because her vocation and her livelihood are kept entirely separate. It has to be so for the sake of her call. But for most of us, we'd like to get it as close together as we can. For some of us, it overlaps, and for others of us, it's almost completely one and the same. So it can vary, but our vocation isn't necessarily the same as our job. And that becomes very clear when you realize you don't retire from a vocation. And the good news is you can't be fired. Well, some of us would like to be fired, I suppose, but you can't be fired, you can't be laid off, you can't be made redundant, and you don't retire. If circumstances may change so that you can no longer be actively involved in the work of your vocation, but the call remains. The call remains. And so it really is something that is with us over our lifetime. Now, what are some typical qualities of a vocation? Well, for one thing, it's received. You don't order one. Now, you may laugh. I've had people come and say, they come to the gifts program and they want a particular charism. Seriously. And they get mad at me if I don't deliver. You know, they come in, they put their money down, they want to be a prophet, they want to be a healer, they want to, you know, something like. And I'm saying, excuse me, but I cannot put in what God has left out. We can help you discern what God is doing. We can help you find the signs, if you will. What are the fingerprints of God in the situation? But it is the Holy Spirit that bestows a call and those gifts, not us. And so we receive our vocation from the Lord. And that's very important. And it is revealed to us as it unfolds. Even, you know, the funny thing is, I did my graduate work on the discernment of vocation in the lives of some really remarkable Christian men and women. That was my thesis. And it was fascinating. Even the people who got the special clues, you know, we all would like to have an angel. I don't know about you. Most people would like to have an angel descend, preferably with flashing lights, you know, that says, hey, Sherry, here's the plan, okay? You know, all in black and white. And then I'll say, fine, Lord, I got it. That's what I would like to have happen. You know, but the fascinating thing is, even when people get extraordinary clues, they almost always misunderstand them. They don't understand what it means. St. Francis got career counseling from a crucifix. Have you seen the picture of the crucifix of San Damiano? Okay, that spoke to St. Francis. And it said, rebuild my church. So what did Francis think? I'm a building contractor. Let's get some bricks, some mortar, and he set to rebuilding the church, the ruined church of San Damiano. Did he think Franciscan order? Okay, we start here, and tomorrow we go over here, and in 800 years we're the largest, you know, order in the church? Of course not. Well, Francis never planned anything anyway, okay? But no. It was revealed to him, the significance of it was revealed to him as he said yes to God and did the next thing. And it's true for all of us. We don't create these great 5-year or 10-year plans. We simply respond to what God, to the next step, and our call will be revealed to us as we are faithful. Now, what are the clues that are available to us? The good news is we don't have to have an angelic visitation. Most of us have been given the clues that we need to begin to discern what God has called us to do. They're available to all of us. And the first one is, frankly, the teaching of the church. The revelation of God's general will for us through Christ's life, his teaching, his death, his resurrection, the scriptures, the tradition, and the experience of great Catholics, of great saints throughout the centuries. All of that is our backdrop. The church's teaching on social issues, on moral discernment. All of these are very important for us. That's why being informed about our faith is a really important part of discerning our call. So they form sort of the big backdrop for the rest of our discernment. We have the church's teaching, and then we have the will of God as it is written in us. Because an awful lot of God's will for us is written in us, in our personality. Are you an extrovert? Okay, my Father Michael Sweeney is the Dominican priest with which I create most of the programs and teach. We founded the Institute together, and he is an introvert, and I'm an extrovert, okay? And you know what an extrovert is? Extroverts are those people who have to talk out loud to figure out if they're thinking. And introverts are deep, right. They dwell deep inside, you know. And as Father Michael's fond of saying, he says, you know, an introvert will look at an extrovert and say, is there any intelligent life there? And of course, my response to him is that an extrovert looks at an introvert and says, is there any life there at all? Okay, but things like our personality, our natural talents, the charisms of the Holy Spirit that we have been given, our cultural background. Now here, you know, we have Maori, Samoan, Tongan, and I heard all this wonderful music yesterday. That is important. Our cultural background, our family background, the skills we've acquired in life, our education, all of that is part of what God is using to prepare us, okay, to answer the call that He has designed for us. And so it's important. That's an important part of our discernment, is to look at that. Now there's a kind of what I call vocational hints. In God's providence, nothing is wasted. Not our suffering, not our mistakes, not our failures, not our successes. Nothing is wasted. How many of you are familiar with the story of Ignatius of Loyola? You've heard of him, right? The founder of the Jesuits, very famous. Well, you know, the funny thing is now, having been raised a Baptist, I somehow had a picture of Ignatius, and he was a really grim, calculating character, all in black. Well, you have to understand, I was raised believing the Jesuits, you know, were the Vatican's way to take over the entire world. And so, you know, and Ignatius obviously was the mastermind behind this evil empire. And so that was my image of him until I actually went to seminary and read the story of his life. He is so totally different from that. And the amazing thing is, actually, Ignatius in the early parts of his life comes across, you want to almost tell him, please, sir, will you come in out of the rain? You know, because he seems so helpless. So it's fascinating. The story is that Ignatius, of course, was a soldier and a nobleman in Spain until the age of 31, when he was actually hurt in battle. He was wounded in the knee. Now, the funny thing is that, you know, the brothers of his greatest disciple were in the enemy. Francis Xavier's brothers were on the other side, aiming the gun that hit Ignatius of Loyola. And of course, the joke is if they'd only aimed a bit higher, you know, all of this would have never happened. But here we have, he's hit in the knee, and the knee does not heal. He goes home and he's in bed for months and months and months. And during that time, he begins to read the lives of the saints, and slowly a desire in him not to be a great knight, you know, secular sense of the word, but to be a knight for Christ. And he comes out of that experience transformed. So what does he do? Does he say, okay, we're going to start the Jesuits? No. The Jesuits are what happened while Ignatius of Loyola was planning to do something else. He goes away to Manresa and spends a couple of years in a cave, praying, doing penance, and it is in the cave that he receives what becomes the famous spiritual exercises. Actually, and the funny thing is that he starts to give them, and the church says to him, what do you think you are doing? Because this is Spain. It's the 16th century. The Reformation is going on. And the church, the whole atmosphere is pretty paranoid. Ignatius was hauled up before the Inquisition 8 times. 8 times. By the very church he was trying to serve. He was actually imprisoned twice. And every time they said to him, you are not qualified to do this. You are a layman, you have no training, you have no background, you've never been to school. So you know what he did? At the age of 33, he went back to school with the 6-year-olds. Literally sat in the same desk with them and started all over again. He spent 12 years in continual education until he ended up with a master's degree at the University of Paris, where he met the men who became the original Jesuits.
He is 45 years old. He's not exactly on the fast track to religious success. Okay? And at 45, he still doesn't know the Jesuits are coming. What instead is he gathers his first group of disciples, actually it was his second, the first group all abandoned him. The second group of disciples, and they decide they take private vows together, and what's their goal? To go to the Holy Land and give the spiritual exercises. They're going to be monks in the Holy Land. That was their vision. So they walk all the way across Europe, they take the boat to the Holy Land, and you know what? It was the only year in that entire century that the boat did not go to the Holy Land. The only year. And they had a plan B, they had a fallback plan, and it was if in a year they couldn't make it to the Holy Land, they would go to Rome, present themselves to the Pope, and ask him what he would like them to do. And so that's what they did. Ignatius of Loyola was 50 years old before the Jesuits were formed. And the education, we take for granted that they're all the equivalent of PhDs, but that wasn't part of Ignatius's plan. That was the result of the pressure, the persecution that he received from the church, who kept insisting that he get the education he needed to carry out his vocation. That's where that educational tradition comes from. Not the great vision of Ignatius of Loyola. It all came together in the last 15 years of his life. And that is, none of it was wasted. None of it was wasted. Ignatius became the great leader of men and the great evangelist, but not because he set out to do it or because he knew what he was doing. He simply did the next thing. He followed God, and he had incredible faith in the face of obstacles. He trusted, he stayed faithful, and God made a way. And that's how it happens for so many of the saints. The second vocational hint is, when you have become God's in the manner that he desires, he himself will know how to bestow you on others. The most important preparation we have for our mission is the person we are becoming. Because we, right now, are becoming the person who is capable of recognizing and responding to the call when it comes. God is preparing each one of us right now. And when we have become God's in the manner that he desires, he will know how to bestow us on others. We don't have to worry about that. What we need to be now is to prepare. The third big clue, we've talked about the church's teaching, we've talked about God's will written in us, but the third big clue, the one that I see a lot of people neglecting, is the needs and of the times and place in which I live. We have in the States, I was just talking to a young woman the other day, and she literally had, in an attempt to find God's will for her life, she had cut herself off almost entirely from the world. She didn't listen to the radio, the television, the newspaper. She didn't talk to people. She sort of wanted to go and pray in her room and wait for God to tell her, directly what she was to do. And I said, well, unfortunately, you've left out one of your major clues, which is what is going on in the world around you. Because as Frederick Buechner says, he says it so beautifully, he says our vocation is where our heart's deep joy meets the world's deep needs. It's where they come together, our heart's deep joy and the world's deep needs. And if we're not attending, if Father Stan said yesterday, if we are not looking, letting ourselves see what is really going on, many of us will miss God's call. And so there's some really important questions. What are the important issues or needs or opportunities that you see? Because we will tend to be particularly sensitive to the situations for which we have been gifted by God. We don't all see the same thing. Some of us will be like Mother Teresa. We will be particularly gripped and see the plight of those who are homeless. Some of us will see the hopelessness of people in prison. Some of us will see the need to stand for truth in the university. Some of us will see the need for beauty and creativity. Some of us, you know, we all see different things because we literally have been given different things to see by God. But what is it? Is there something that is compelling that will not let you go? A burden, a situation, a relationship, a person, a place that will not let you go. Pay attention. It may be the call of God. So it's very important. And vocation, there's another hint that I like to give, and this really surprised me. It came out of my graduate work, and then I later discovered that other people had also noticed this, and that is most vocations emerge, become visible in later life. You know, it's funny. When I was first teaching on this, I used to think that it would be the 20-year-olds who would, you know, be really eager to know what is it that I'm supposed to do. And what I discovered, actually, I was speaking to a group, and I had one woman who was about 65, and she started crying, and she said this very morning, she says, I was on a walk with my husband, and I told him if only God would tell me what I'm going to be when I grow up. What I'm discovering is the hunger never ends. We're all wondering what we're going to be when we grow up. And especially as we get older, the questions become more and more acute. You know, when you're 20, you can say, well, if I decide to be a brain surgeon tomorrow, okay, I can do it. Now, you may be deluding yourself, but you can still feel that way. But as we get older, we realize I'm not going to be a brain surgeon. I'm not going to be a prima ballerina. You know, I'm not going to be an opera singer. I'm not going to be a rocket scientist. If you will, we realize the options are more specific than that. And the question becomes more acute. What is it God is calling me to? What is the purpose of my life? And so it's a question we ask at all ages. But the fascinating thing is most vocations seem to develop in later life. Early adulthood is a time of preparation for the call, the time of becoming the person we need to be so that we can hear it and respond. So don't give up hope if you know, at 16, 18, or 21 when you left school, you know, you didn't have it all figured out. That's normal. That is normal. What is important is that we become the person God intends us to be, and we will be ready when the call comes. The fourth thing that is very important is having the input of others, a wise spiritual director or mentor. If you have a spiritual director, you are incredibly fortunate. God bless you. But you can also get that. I know they're hard to find. We can also get insights from those who know us well, who love us, our family, our friends, perhaps lay people who are trained in this area. And we can learn a lot from reading the lives of the saints. Because often their lives, something about their call, will speak to us and will evoke a call in us as well. And so the responses of others are part of it. The four big areas of clues, again, are the church's teaching, what God has created in us, our personal uniqueness, the needs of the time and place in which we live, and the counsel and guidance of others who are spiritually mature and love us. Where those four clues come together, where they converge, is sort of an arena where we have been equipped by God to act. It's what I call the general area of our call. You can envision it like a circle. And somewhere within that is our vocation. It's smaller, it's more specific. But we can identify this general area of call. And when we have done that, I realized some years ago that I am what I call a people gardener. Okay, you don't see that in career manuals. But a people gardener, because somehow people grew around me. And that seemed to be how I was called. Now, that was the closest I could get to it. So I'd sort of identified this general area. And then what do you do once you've identified that? You go there. This is going to sound very simple. You go there. You hang out. You offer yourself to God. You listen. You pay attention. And you do the next obvious thing. Let me give you an example. Are you familiar with the L'Arche communities? Have you heard of L'Arche? It's quite well known. It's an international community, Catholic community that is spread all over the world. I think there's about 100 communities now, in which the handicapped lived in community with the non-handicapped. The story behind it is wonderful. Jean Vanier was the son of the Governor General of Canada, so he came from a very privileged background. But he had this sense that he didn't know. He knew God was calling him, but he didn't know how. And so during most of his 20s and 30s, he seemed somewhat to be drifting. He studied and he went to school, he lectured a little, he prayed, but he knew he had not yet identified what God was calling him to. When he was 36, he visited an institution for the handicapped in France. And he said it was the way they were treated, it was so inhuman that all he knew was Jesus wanted something done about this. That was it. Jesus wanted something done. Did he say, okay, we're going to start a whole movement, communities all over the world? No. He said, what can I do? I have a little home of my own. I can invite 3 men to come and live with me out of that institution. And that's what he did. He started right where he was with what he could do. All he knew was Jesus wanted something done about this. This is what I can do right now. And that's where it began. He didn't know about L'Arche. All he did was did the next obvious thing. And God led him from there. That is how most of the great vocations in the history of the church have happened. Because somebody prayerfully engaged in the world realized Jesus wanted something done about this. And they didn't have big plans. They just said, this is okay, Jesus wants something done, I can do this. I'll start here. And that's how it begins. So it's very important. It is not something, we don't have to be great, we don't have to be saints. It is something that is available to any one of us. Now, I just want to mention quickly the issue of charisms, because I did mention them yesterday. What is the significance of our charisms? Remember those gifts of the Holy Spirit that we are given for the sake of others? Remember I talked about that? All of us receive them, at least one in baptism and confirmation. They are very important in this process because with a charism comes a call. We had a woman in Seattle, it was great. She ran into me in a conference there and she said, oh, I just have to tell you, that workshop changed my life. I said, oh, great. And she said, yeah. She said, I always knew I loved music, but I never realized it was a call. And she said, when I realized it was a call, she said, that meant I had to rearrange my life. And she says, I'm sorry, but I can't come to any more of your workshops because I'm getting trained to be a cantor. Too busy, I said, great. That's wonderful. Because that was the point. She had the call and she was seeking to answer it. But with the charism, God is calling us. And so we need to really pay attention and to nurture, specifically nurture those parts of our lives where we have received those kinds of gifts. Charisms are tools with which to carry out our mission, and they are major clues as to what our vocation actually is, which is one of the reasons we do lots of gifts discernment in the parishes in North America, to help people, as a beginning place, to help people discern God's call in their life. Now, one question that does come up a lot is everybody going to know what their call is in their lifetime? I mean, can you name it? And I think the honest answer is no. But the fact that you cannot name it does not mean you will not be able to live it. Those are two different matters altogether. God will make a way for you to live it, even if you can't necessarily put a label on it. Okay? It's very important. If we are willing to prayerfully discern the clues we have to identify that area of general call, and then to place ourselves there, make ourselves available to the Lord, and when we sense Jesus wants something done here, we follow that. God will make a way for us to live our call. We don't have to worry about that. And it's interesting, if we explore that general area, often it becomes much clearer what the specifics of our personal vocation is. And God is perfectly capable, if he needs to move us over, he is perfectly capable of saying, okay, no, Sherry, over here. All right? Little to the right. He certainly has done that for me. He is infinitely more eager for us to know what our purpose in life is than we are. We don't have to worry that he, sometimes we all have this sense that if only we could make him cough it up. You know, he knows, but he's not telling. No, we can trust. God is infinitely more eager that we do what he has created and gifted us for than we are. And so if we are faithful, we will be able to find it. There's a lot of personal concerns that people share in the course of the workshops about this whole issue. And one of the most poignant to me is always, but I didn't do it right. And that's a variation of, I'm 20, I'm 40, I'm 60, I'm 80. I didn't major in the right field. I didn't go to university. I married the wrong person. I didn't marry the wrong person. I should have been a priest. I should have been a nun. You know, I can't tell you how many variations of, I didn't do it perfectly, I made the wrong choice. Is it all over for me? And the answer, of course, is no. God does not insist that we guess perfectly. We do that to ourselves. But God is infinitely merciful. He does not do that. And for many of us, we face real injustice, real opposition, you know, that's deeply embedded. And not even that can stop the call of God. That you read the lives of the saints, and some of them put up with incredible opposition from within the church, from without it, from people, from their families who just didn't understand, institutionalized injustice, and every one of us has got some liabilities. You know, we may be the wrong sex, we're the wrong color, we're the wrong background, we don't have the right education, maybe we've got physical disabilities. All of us are facing. You know, we come from wounded family backgrounds, and we're all acutely aware of the obstacles that stand in our way. But the good news is that if we are faithful to Christ, he will make a way. Now, it's important to realize it may not be the way that we had originally in mind, you understand, okay? I mean, like Ignatius of Loyola, we may be trying to get to Jerusalem, and God is actually pushing us to Rome. Okay, we may be wanting to be a monk giving the spiritual exercises, and God is saying, well, no, actually, you know, pay attention, Ignatius. There's something larger here. But we can trust that if we are faithful, God will make a way. The only thing that can ultimately thwart God's call in our life is if we leave him. That's the only thing. And so our faithfulness is very critical, but we don't have to be geniuses. We don't have to get it all right. If we fail, we fall down, we pick ourselves up, and we come back, but we stay faithful. And if we are faithful, God will make a way for us. Because wherever we are, we can never be thrown away. We can never be thrown away. And so this is our time. That is the good news. That if we offer ourselves to the Lord, our lives will become something beyond which we could ever hope or imagine. And so I want to encourage you today, this weekend, whatever God may have been speaking to you, whatever calls there may be in your life, this is the time to say, "Here I am, Lord, send me." Thanks very much. God bless.